Junior cycle history students need to look at one example of a pre-20th century revolution from outside of Ireland. So some students might look at the American Revolution, other students might look at the French Revolution, but you only need one. Today we're going to have a little look at some of the background and causes of the American Revolution. So the American Revolution refers to 13 American colonies, versus England, all right? So it's not the entire 50 states that we think of today when we think of America. It was 13 colonies versus England. And they're called colonies at the time because they were under the control of another country. They were under the control of England. So they're not called states yet, they're called colonies. Virginia was the first colony to be established, and that was established in 1606. By 1760, the 13 colonies were home to 2.5 million people, and these colonies were exceptionally wealthy, mainly from the production of crops like cotton and tobacco. Another factor that helped contribute to the wealth of the colonies is that the majority of the work, the majority of the labour, was all done by slaves. King George III, he was King of England at the time. He sent a governor to rule each colony. Each colony had an assembly who was there to advise this governor. But the colonies had no actual say or representation in Westminster in London. Let's have a little look at some of the causes of the American Revolution, and quite a number of them revolve around taxation or money. If we start with the Navigation Acts, some American goods could only be sold through England. With England acting as the middleman, they made a considerable amount of money. The colonists didn't think that England deserved this money basically, and often resorted to widespread smuggling, which led to clashes with England. The 7 Years' War and British debt was another cause of the American Revolution. England and America joined forces to defeat the French, who had colonies in Canada and in America. This war was incredibly expensive and increased British national debt. Britain insisted that Americans be taxed to pay for the cost of the war, and Americans were also responsible for paying for the upkeep of British soldiers while they were in America. The Stamp Act was a particularly famous cause of the American Revolution. This meant that Americans had to pay a tax on all newspapers and legal documents. They had to get this stamp on it, and they had to pay for that. The Sons of Liberty were a group who protested this. They protested this by burning these stamps and by attacking stamp officials. Britain imposed a series of taxes such as the Sugar Act and the Quartering Act. And as we mentioned before, many colonists believed that there should be no taxation without representation, so that they should not be paying these taxes when they were not represented in Westminster. They didn't have a say. In 1767, the Townshend Acts introduced another series of taxes on items such as tea and glass. The Boston Massacre, there were 5 protesters killed protesting these Townshend Acts. The Sons of Liberty used this as a propaganda opportunity to kind of rally public support against the British. In 1773, the Boston Tea Party took place, and this was another cause of the American Revolution, or some would view it as kind of a step towards or on the road to war. Colonists dressed up as Native Americans, and they boarded ships in Boston Harbor, and they dumped all of the tea overboard. Britain saw this as an act of open rebellion and introduced the Intolerable Acts as a punishment, which closed the port of Boston until the East India Trading Company had been repaid for the loss of all the tea. In 1774, the first meeting of the Continental Congress took place. So this was a meeting between representatives from each colony. It was decided that each colony would train a militia, so a part-time army, just to kind of prepare themselves for kind of an approaching or an impending war. In 1775, British General Gage heard that the Americans were storing weapons and ammunition in Concord near Boston. 800 British troops were sent to destroy these weapons. The British were attacked at Lexington, but they fought their way through to Concord. They were then defeated at Concord and they were forced all the way back to Boston. This is generally considered the kind of first action, the first fighting, the first shots of the American Revolution.